Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
We are so glad that you guys are joining us today. We have company. We always love it when we have a guest speaker. And Sarah, I'm going to let you tell us a little bit about you. And then Carrie will kind of jump us into our topic for the day and we'll go from there.
Sounds good, Kate. Well, my name is Sarah Schreiner. I am the CEO and founder of Childminder. We are an organization that empowers individuals to own and operate high quality, profitable childcare programs. And so I'm so excited to be here and get a chance to visit with y'all. You've been visiting with several of my closest friends. And so it's always nice I'm like, hey, I'm in the loop now. I get to talk to these ladies.
Well, we like to have people who care for the early childhood leaders. You know, it seems like an awful lot of the focus is on either how to make money or is on the frontline staff. And so that middle section gets missed. And so we try to find people who are interested in helping that middle section, not the person who's been talking to their accountant all day and not the person who's been talking to the child who doesn't know how to wipe their nose all day.
Absolutely. I would agree with you. It's an underserved population by far.
Yeah. Well, we've been really excited to work with this population for 23 years now and are really excited to talk to you about what I'm sure everybody wants to hear more people talk about, which is staffing. And
hey, you took my job.
Well, you took too long.
So today we're going to talk about different ways to attract staff and to retain them, right?
Yes.
Because finding them is great, but if they don't last through the second day at lunch, then you just have to do all that work all over again. So what are some of the things, I know you've been working in conjunction with, different grantors and different experts in the field. So what are some of the tried and true, the most like, this is actually working in 2024?
But only give them one of the clues, because I understand you have a workshop coming up.
I do. We have a roundtable on August 7th, and we are going to be really diving into the culture in your program. And we're going to be talking about the different strategies for, like you said, not only getting the bodies in the door, but making sure they're high quality. They're not just a warm body in the corner and that we're keeping them there, right? And so we're going to be visiting with Dr. Brittany from Impact Early Education. And I would, anybody if you're struggling, and here's the thing, I hear all the time, everyone says, I'm sick of talking about staff. I'm just tired of talking about the staffing. Can we move on from this? No, we can't move on from this, because if we solve this, the rest of it's really easy. So if we can figure this out, it's that ripple effect, and everything kind of stems from having that real high quality team that is supporting you and functioning like a well-oiled machine. I would say, the one tried and true, and before we hopped on, I visited with both of you about how right now everyone's looking for this new shiny quick fix to make their staffing, to solve all of their staffing problems. They want the new technology. They want the new staffing software. They want, if we just have more money to pay them more, what's going to, that's going to keep them in there. And
or going back to staffing agencies, like one of those technologies we used back in the 1900s, in the 1980s, right? Oh,
okay.
Or
those staffing agencies that maybe didn't last too long.
Absolutely. And I think that we get so stuck in trying to find brand new solutions, which is great. Like I'm an innovation girl. Like you let me think outside of the box, right? But we forget to do those basic things, like making sure we have consistent daily touch points with our team, doing our one-on-one with the director and the staff, making sure that we know them as individuals, not just as a body in the program. But you girls are the experts. You've been in this a little bit longer than I have. what would you say? Would you agree with that? That is one of the tried and true strategies?
I would say that onboarding is the thing that people overlook the most. And they're like, I need to get somebody in my center this week and tomorrow, if at all possible. So I'm going to do an interview, offer them the job at the interview, and then send them home with a pre-service workbook and have them start work tomorrow. And then they wonder why that person didn't last out the week. That's bananas to me. And I get the crisis mentality, but if you are staffing your program that way, you're going to continue to have to restaff your program because nobody's lasting. You've got to slow down, hire slow, fire fast.
So I heard the greatest quote. It was, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I loved that because I thought, so many times we're like, like you said, we have to get this done, go, go, go. And we feel that rush for having to, yes, we have to meet ratio. Yes, there's all of these regulatory things that we're trying to accomplish, but we're just juggling balls in the air continuously. And we're not even doing a very good job at it, honestly.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because one of the things that I think that is really, especially over the last few years, that's kind of stuck in my craw is that everybody seems to want to hire people with experience. So we're recycling people who aren't at other programs. I'm like, they've either left or somebody's let them go. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when, and I'm sure you've seen this, where people keep putting a childcare center or a restaurant in the same place over and over because that's what that building was for.
Yep.
Just because this person has experience doesn't necessarily mean that this is the right industry for them.
And if they've worked at 14 centers in the past 3 years, that is not a bonus for your school.
Isn't that they have loads of experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I hear
with
that
lots of different educational philosophies.
Well, and we tell our team we will hire over values every day of the week versus experience because we can teach the skills that are needed to be successful. But I'll tell you what, if those values don't align, it's a matter of time before I'm telling them to hit the road or they're just doing a no-show.
So Sarah, what is something that, so when we have directors listen, sometimes they get stuck. They're like, well, what do you mean by values over skills? So what's a question that you might ask in the interview that to you is this is my values question, or this is the one that kind of like, if they blow this one, I don't care if they show up tomorrow.
So one of my favorite questions to ask in an interview is, tell me about a time you made a mistake at work. And I love that one because not very many people are expecting that one. It usually catches them a little bit off guard, which I think then you get probably a little bit more authentic answer from them. Mm-hmm. B, what I'm looking for is I'm really looking to see how are they going to respond. Are they taking accountability? Are they passing the blame on someone else? Are they willing to own their responsibility or be part of a solution? And so it gives me a lot of insight into how are they going to handle those tough situations, because I don't expect someone to come into my program and be perfect. I want them to be able to make mistakes, and usually, people are going to make mistakes. And so I want to know, okay, how are you going to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and how are you going to push our program to be even better by making these mistakes?
Oh, I love that question. Carrie, what's your favorite question to ask about culture or fit?
Well, because I always think of it from I'm hiring them to be in a classroom. I have different ones for different age groups. And mine are all about how would you handle this situation that is not an everyday situation, but it is entirely reasonable that this would happen. So if I'm hiring for a school age staff person, I am like, okay, I know you've never run a field trip before, but just put yourself in this situation and what would your knee-jerk reaction be? You're taking kids on a field trip. You're halfway there and a kid in the back row in the middle throws up. what would you do? And those kinds of questions. And I try to give them something that is something that they're like, oh, I have had a friend who threw up on the way to a field trip, or, oh yeah, I've heard about how kids, they're just walking across the playground and they fall over and they scrape their knee and there was nothing there. They just tripped over air, or, those kinds of things that are just weird, but happen every year at childcare programs. I'm not going to say every day, but because I want to see how they're getting a chance to think ahead about a stressful situation and how do they think they would respond. And if their response is, well, I am a person who, if I smell that, I reciprocate, there are classrooms I'm not going to be able to put them in. And that I'm not going to find that out any other way. But also, you can learn an awful lot about their tolerance for the weirdness of kids by asking those kinds of questions. Because if they think that they're going to be able to sit behind a desk and just make beautiful bulletin boards and watch children play duck, duck, goose, they're going to be in for a surprise when they come into a classroom.
Oh, the idea of what working with in childcare looks like and what it actually is are two very different. They don't align for most people. I think it takes a very special person for them to be in alignment.
Yeah, I really think Daddy Daycare is one of the best movies that actually captures what it's like. There's a kid running around, there's an adult dressed as a piece of broccoli. Like, you don't know what's happening unless you were there from the beginning. You don't understand what's happening. Kate, do you have one of those culture fit questions that you love?
So probably one of the ones, especially since 2021, that's become really important to me is like literally how do you communicate with your coworkers and your management? And this is more than them just talking to me about, like, I don't know, what they think I want to hear. Like, I'm really looking for the honest answer. Are you a texter? Are you a caller? Are you an emailer? And try to get that kind of a feel, because I've noticed that my major disconnect with some of my staff has been, I'm a big emailer, so I'm going to email you everything. And my younger staff are big, texters, social media platforms or something, usually not ones I'm on. And so I have to figure out how to communicate with them anything, whether it's staff meetings or whatever. And so I have found that I have to have that as a real honest conversation and then talk about where might that get us in trouble. Because if I'm hiring for, if everybody else is in their mid 40s, 50s plus, and I've got somebody who will not pick up the phone, we might have an issue at some point in time. And so, but it's worth having as a discussion. And to me, it's a really good discussion question, and to see how they kind of handle, yes, you might have to actually talk to me, that you can't do everything through an app. So,
or with having some staff that doesn't really matter their age, but they're like, you want me to put a new app on my phone so that I can talk to people in Slack or Airtable or Basecamp or whatever one of those you're using as your communication app within the team? And they're like, no, my phone is a phone. I don't want another app on my phone. It's a phone. I've had a couple of those.
Yeah. Like, they're pretty tech savvy for what they have. They just don't want another one. And I think we can all relate to kind of like that. Kind of falls into Sarah's the next shiny object, right? What's the next way to
absolutely.
way to make it happen?
I think it's been about 18 months ago. And so I also own 3 childcare programs, and we started looking and seeing how can we streamline the number of systems we're asking our team to use, because we were right there with everyone. You got your ProCare, you've got QuickBooks, you've got Bamboo HR, you've got, like you said, Slack, you've got all and our team was, they were getting to the point, it was confusing. Where do I find this information? And so we were making our jobs harder by bringing in the new shiny object, the next thing. And so we've had to really start challenging ourselves. Just because it says in their great marketing that it's going to simplify our lives, is it really? And how, what is the return on investment for not just us financially, but also for our team's time and energy that we're asking them to put into whatever we have them use.
I think you brought up a great point, which is sometimes those new shiny objects, just the time it takes to teach people to use something that's new and shiny. I mean, there is something to be said about, can you make it work, or can you do it with, Microsoft systems or with Google, Google apps or something that they're going to be able to use other places. And, and I have that conversation with directors every day. It's like, okay, so, I don't have a problem with you using a childcare software, but if you had a conversation with your accountant, can he get the information he needs from that software? Or do you have to do, where does it fall? Because if you've been using QuickBooks and they just dial in and use your account and they can do whatever they need from the accountant side of your accountant, and directors look at me and go, oh, I didn't even think to talk to him. Like, okay, or her, right? Didn't even think to talk to my accountant about spending money on this big software because it's going to make life easy.
Well, but the other thing that we can end up with is I bought ProCare in 1994, and it hasn't caused us any significant problems since 1994. So I'm going to continue to use it, and I will only use the desktop version because that's the one I know. And the desktop version of ProCare and the cloud version of ProCare aren't the same product. They just have the same name. And so people are like, no, you can do this in your ProCare. And they're like, I don't have that button. And so there are reasons to move from one you've had since the 90s. And it can be you stay with ProCare if you're a ProCare person, because you've been with ProCare since the 90s, but maybe move to the cloud version of ProCare. And yes, there will be some learning in that, but I think at least once every 2 years, we need to look at our software suite. I would prefer once a year.
That's what I was going to recommend, doing an audit about once a year, where you go through and you look not only your software, but your subscriptions that you get sucked into, the different subscriptions, and that's a great way to make your team feel like part of, or to be bought into the culture. Okay, we're going to sit down, we're going to look at this. Are we really using these things the way that it was intended? We want your feedback. Is it making your job easier or harder? And when we go back to retention and we're talking about keeping good people like to be places that they feel valued.
Absolutely. And that kind of comes back to even what are the things that you as a director like to do, not like to do? What are you good at? What are you not so good at and don't like to do? And I think those pain points are exactly what those software solutions are trying to do. But if you have a secondary staff person, so the owner might have bought it, and then you might have a director and an assistant director. If they find it too clunky and they're going to do it their way, maybe the owner made software based on their own. These are the things I don't like to do, with forgetting that they hired people to do those things who are really good at using A, B, or C. Mm-hmm. So my favorite are the people who start with a software because it's free. And so they make all these changes because the state has now bought it for them for a year.
Because
okay, so what happens if at the end of the year you don't like it? Yeah. And you've got to start all over again. So,
yeah. And that's definitely happening right now. People are, have software that was purchased as part of the QIP program at their state. And they're like, here, have this thing. And they're like, we're going to pay for it for this first year because we have an extra $400,000 of COVID money that we had to spend before September 1st. And this is a good way to spend it. and then you get attached to it. It's kind of like what Nestle has done in third world countries with baby formula. Here, mom, have some baby formula for your baby. It will solve all your problems. And then the baby, milk production changes. And then how do they afford the formula once they stop getting it for free? And, especially with centers that got used to, here's some free money, here's some free COVID money. And so they were just spending money. And then they were like, oh, the money stopped.
We've seen a lot of that. And I've talked to a lot of owners and directors who all of a sudden the books aren't balancing anymore. And they didn't, they added these additional expenses, but their tuition rates did not increase as reflective of that because there was another funding source. And so I tell them, you've got a couple options here. We either have to increase the funding sources, like figure out how to bring more in, or we need to get creative with what's going out.
Absolutely. I think that's just for those of us on this end that wish we could have had those conversations with the directors when they were taking the money, and like the ones who were surprised they were taxed, who didn't budget for those. Folks who made decisions that they didn't think through 1 to 2 years down the road. And so but if you think about that, what might you say to a director who has maybe had a little of that, even from a staffing standpoint? How would you help them if they were popping on and they're going to jump on the round table on August 7th and they hear this and they're like, okay, I know I need to hire staff, but like in my community, I'm already paying X. What are some ways to help that director remember there's more than just the dollar sign?
I think having those conversations about what does culture actually look like in your program, and how is your team going out and being your greatest advocates. So we know that the majority of enrollments in childcare programs come from word of mouth, right? We can spend a ton of money on advertising, but almost always it's Johnny's mom told me, when you come in the door. The same thing is happening for those really good hires. Your good people find good people. And so are you pouring into your current team as much as you need to, so that they're going out saying, no, you've got to work here. Yes, it might not, it might be only X dollars, but I'm telling you, I love my job and I love what I do. That's where we've got to start putting our focus.
I love that, Sarah. That is great. I think that is so important. And any tips you have that you might want to share as links or anything, definitely in our show notes, we will have the links to the Childminder roundtable discussion. I'm like, I wrote it down what it was actually called, the roundtable discussion on August 7th, and really excited to be able to share that with our listeners and with folks who get our newsletter. And Carrie, do you have anything else you want to add?
I just want to reiterate what Sarah said. Making your current staff your biggest cheerleaders, it makes it so much easier to hire additional staff.
So I have the Raving Fans book. I didn't know that that's what we were going to talk about, but that's that book. So if you don't have that book in your bookshelf as a director, go definitely check out Childcare Conversations on Pinterest. We have both a board on interview questions for culture and fit. We also have a board on books to have at your bookshelf. It probably helps if you read them too. So
not just
come on, am I the only person that has books up there that I've never read? Well, okay, maybe not on that shelf.
I think it's funny. All three of us are sitting in front of our bookshelves.
Well, because a good director has a resource library, and you know at least what's in them, even if you haven't read all of them, because sometimes we have books in our resource library that is how to successfully parent a toddler with ADHD or whatever. And we may not have one of those, but it's a book that is highly recommended by the occupational therapist who works with the kids with attention issues or whatever. So you should have a diverse resource library at your center so that you can support your staff and you can support your parents.
I like it.
All right, Carrie, you want to wrap us up?
Okay, wrap up. No, I don't want to wrap us up is the answer, but I will. So if you learned something today, please share it with those who need to know. There's somebody out there that you know who needs this information. Don't be greedy and keep it to yourself. Share it with other people. Go on into your podcast app of choice and write a review so that other people know that we exist. And definitely sign up for that roundtable with Sarah, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie. Want to learn more? Check out our website at texasdirector.org. And if you've learned anything today, leave us a comment below and share the show.